I think it's clear from the lesson of what's been happening over the course of the last year that the previous arrangements were more effective, and we're going to work hard to move back towards that, as is the Mexican government, as I think I can speak for the auto sector as a whole, has given extensive consultations. That's what the auto sector thinks is in the best interest as well. That said, what we're doing today is robust to whatever tariff outcome happens in that review.
Prime Minister Mark Carney there unveiling a new auto sector strategy the feds say will make the industry less reliant on gas-powered vehicles and, as you heard there, less dependent on the U.S. Here's a breakdown. The government says they'll scrap the electric vehicle sales mandate, another Trudeau-era environmental policy now gone. Instead, they're promising new emission standards to be detailed in the future. And rebates are returning, with the government launching a 5-year EV affordability program to the tune of $2.3 billion. The rebate is $5,000 for EVs, $2,500 for plug-in hybrids. The rebates apply to vehicles not just made in Canada, but in countries we have free trade deals with. Ontario Premier Doug Ford was absent from the Fed's announcement, but in his own press conference was asked if he'd consider provincial EV rebates.
We took a different approach. I remember when I first got elected, we were giving rebates to millionaires that were buying $100,000 Teslas. We decided to take a different approach. We invested billions of dollars into domestic-made cars, and the Prime Minister wants to support incentives. By all means, whatever it takes to protect our auto workers.
Melanie Joly is the Federal Minister of Industry. Hi, Minister. Pleasure, as always, to welcome you back to the program. Thank you for making the time.
Thank you.
The new strategy that you and the Prime Minister announced today appears to be all in on EVs. How can you be sure, given the volatility in the North American market and your government's history with that sector, that it's the right decision?
Well, first and foremost, it is all in for automaking in Canada. So it is supporting Toyota, Honda, that are producing 77% of all our auto production, obviously in Canada. It is to support also those working in Windsor, in Oakville, in Oshawa. So it is first and foremost a Buy Canada policy. And then, of course, we also believe that the future of the industry is EV. Why? Because by 2035, we know that 40% of EVs, that the cars sold in the world will be EVs. We know that. And so while it is happening in Europe, it is happening in Asia and Latin America, everywhere. The only place in the world where that has not really been happening as much is really North America. But we know that that's the trend. And so while other countries are taking their own decisions, and while we can't control what's going on in Washington, we need to make sure that we embrace progress. It is our promise to auto workers that they will continue to have great jobs in the future, and so that's why we're also investing in electrification.
And certainly I understand the motivation, right? And I wouldn't try to say that your government wants anything other than to make sure the sector is around. But I also think part of my job is making sure that what you're promising will actually result in that. And when I look at the record of the Liberals in this sector, there are major challenges presented. For example, I can think back to 2022 when then the minister who occupied your portfolio at the time, François-Philippe Champagne, said, "Today is proof that Canada's auto sector is here for the long term." And that was when you were announcing more federal money going towards GM and Ingersoll and Oshawa. You know, as well as our viewers know, what has happened now. There are other examples of billions of dollars that your government promised because the EV sector was going to be the sector of the future, and things dramatically changed, and we're having trouble recouping those costs. Why in this instance should Canadians trust your government is doing something that will keep the sector alive when that has not been the case?
And I think that's a fair question. And that was the question we were struggling with, which was, you know, how can we make sure that we protect our auto base, our industrial base, and at the same time, how can we be ambitious? And that's why we were, I think, able to square the circle. Because when you look at it, after 10 years of investment, even nearly 15 years of investments in the auto sector, the biggest investments are now actually happening and hiring people, because it is what happened in Windsor with LG and Stellantis building a battery plant, and people, you know, the company is still hiring, and at term it's 3,000 jobs. St. Thomas, so basically the Volkswagen plant in St. Thomas is being built as we speak, and it is to hire 3,000 people, and the hiring has already started. So these investments are transforming communities. At the same time, what we're doing is we're making sure that our investment in defense, particularly I must say, submarine procurement is able to, through submarine procurement, we're able to attract either investments from Korea or from Germany. And also, we know that there's lots of interest by Chinese companies to invest in Canada and produce cars here, but we want to make sure that auto workers are protected, so we'll favor unionization. We want to make sure that the software in these cars is also safe, and we want to make sure that there's a local supply chain, so basically our small and medium-sized businesses can support these investments. So all that to say, it is, I agree, an ambitious approach, but we also think that the North American market, Vashi, will continue to change. And we think we should not be naive, and we think that there may be Chinese investments coming in the future in other parts of North America. So basically, our goal is to leapfrog what is going on in the North American market and be able to also produce the best cars in the world for the world. So basically not being hostage of our geography here in North America, but also to be able to export around the world.
I do want to ask you about the question of Chinese investment and more largely the kind of affordability pitch in allowing for 49,000, for example, Chinese EVs to enter the market. I remember when you occupied the position of Minister of Foreign Affairs and the centrality of the Indo-Pacific strategy at the time, which I think it was November of 2022, that you announced that strategy. You said that China seeks to shape the global environment at that time into one that is more permissive to interests and values that increasingly depart from ours. The China of 1970, to quote your own words, is not the China of today. China is an increasingly disruptive global power. I understand the point your government has made that the world has changed, that the United States has changed. But, Minister, with all due respect, China has not changed. Why is opening up the market to China a good idea?
Well, first and foremost, we've been victims of the U.S. trade war against us. So our goal is to make sure that we're able to find new markets. At the same time, I must say that it's eyes wide open. We made sure that we would be having guardrails in this important agreement that we've been able to sign with China. Our goal was to resolve a lot of the outstanding issues, which had to be resolved. It was important for canola farmers to be able to have access to the Chinese market, same for our fishers. But at the same time, China is investing around the world and exporting EVs around the world. It is the case in Europe. It is the case also across Asia. What we've done, I think, is something that is very unique, but we believe that it is our way to not only benefit from our great expertise, because we have some of the biggest auto parts companies in the world, Linamar, Martin Ria, Magna, which are all headquartered in Ontario. But at the same time, we think that attracting investments from Chinese automakers working in joint ventures with Canadian companies is the way to really be able to embrace this new technology that has been developed by China, and that will be able to offer cheaper EVs and also quality EVs. So not a lot of jurisdictions are able to do that in the world. Magna, Canadian company, is already building for a Chinese company in Austria, Xpeng, and they're already in China. So these are just examples of what we intend to do for the Canadian market. And I think that in time, it will be good for the North American market also, but not only the North American market. I really think that because we have 51 free trade agreements with the world, we can export elsewhere.
And I take the point about the economics of again, trying to diversify, make EVs more affordable. But I see no evidence, unless you do, that China is a less disruptive global power. And your government has made decisions now to open a market that you have, talked about how important it is to the Canadian economy, open up a market to Chinese investments in the auto sector, to open up more Chinese investment in oil and gas, for example, another critical asset for Canada. Is that a mistake given your own assessment of China just a few short years ago?
Well, I think things have changed. When you make assessments, it's based also on the context in which you're making them. And the U.S. has decided to change its course when it comes to trade. And Canadian auto workers are the first victims of that. And so, of course, we'll continue to seek a good agreement with the U.S. and with Mexico. We will obviously put a lot of time and efforts in the renewal and revision of the CUSMA agreement. But at the same time, the negotiations that we've had with China have been more predictable and much more stable than the experience we've had with the U.S. And that's a statement I made a month ago, and I stand by my statement, because we're not the only ones experiencing that. Ask the question to Europeans, ask the questions to the Japanese, ask the question to the Koreans. They're experiencing the same reality as we are.
Don't you think, though, with respect, Minister, that that's by design by China, that they see the world as it is right now and want to seize on the moment for less than altruistic purposes?
Well, it's up for them to answer that question. Our approach will be always to defend our national interests, to defend basically our workers, to create opportunities here in the country. And so we're always reacting to what is happening in the White House, and that was certainly our approach in 2025. But Vashi, I must say, in 2026, we have a plan, and we're implementing it. And so we won't be always just waiting to see what will happen. We need to be able to be in charge of our own destiny. That's why we came up with this new auto strategy, and that is why we know there's lots of change. We know that that can be very stressful for families across those working in across the auto sector, but we will support them, and we will accompany them as we're embracing this change, and we will make sure that we're creating new jobs. And you know what? That's what happened in the 80s. In the 80s, the D3 were shutting down plants across Ontario and Quebec. It was really difficult. I still have memories of the closure of GM in Sainte-Thérèse, Quebec. And you know what happened? The government at the time, the progressive conservatives of Brian Mulroney, decided to go to Japan and attract Japanese automakers. And now where are we? 77% of our auto production is Honda and Toyota. So that's why we're looking at other options. Germany, Korea, China, and that's what we need to do, because we cannot be just stuck in the same approach.
I understand it. I guess I would just quickly point out Japan and China are definitely not the same kind of world actor. But very quickly before I let you go, Minister, if I could ask you about Jamil Javani, the Conservative MP who headed to the United States. He said that he was going to meet, and I don't have confirmation, this is just through his social media channels, that he was going to meet with GM. And I just wondered if he had asked for a briefing or if you had offered one.
No, I think it's because I actually called him on it, saying that as MP in charge of Oshawa constituents that are working at GM, that are losing their job, why is he just embracing the Trump administration that is putting tariffs on them and having them, lose their job? And why is he basically not denouncing the U.S. auto tariffs? And that's just a question that across Oshawa people are asking.
He says he can be of help to the government by going there. Do you think that's possible?
I'm not in his heart nor in his mind. I'm just looking at what he says and what are the facts. And until I actually said on television that he was not talking and denouncing the GM layoffs, he didn't talk about it. And now he's talking about it. So I think, basically it talks for itself.
I'll leave it on that note. Minister, I appreciate your time as always. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Have a great day.